All right, poetry fans, are you ready for a deep dive of a slightly different sort? Today we're dissecting this, let's say, ambitious guide, Mastering Poetry, Stage, Rituals, and Words as Weapons.
Okay.
Already sounds like a declaration of war, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. The author takes himself pretty seriously. Almost as seriously as Rafael Nadal placing his water bottles. But hey, maybe that's his secret recipe for an epic stage performance.
Water bottle feng shui for the poetry elite. I'll try to take it seriously. So the author claims all these rituals, whether with water bottles or incense sticks, are basically just an expression of pure fear.
Well, who would have thought that behind Nadal's meticulous bottle arrangement, there's a trembling soul afraid of the next serve? But honestly, there's some truth to it.
Yeah.
Rituals give us a sense of control in situations that actually scare us.
So it's like a security blanket for big boys and girls. Right, but the author thinks we should throw this pseudo-control overboard and conquer this stage with a good dose of chaos.
Chaos is a ladder, as a wise man once said. But whether that really goes down well on stage? I'm just imagining the author storming the stage with a chainsaw and a megaphone, blasting the audience with Dada poems.
I'd be curious to see if Nadal's water bottles could withstand that. But jokes aside, I find it interesting that the author puts so much emphasis on this fear. Not exactly what you'd expect from a poetry master.
Right, more like the fear master. But maybe that's their gimmick. First unsettle people and then emerge as the savior with their ultimate guide.
Sounds like a clever marketing plan.
Yeah.
But hey, if it works. But let's leave the water bottles and chaos aside and get to the heart of poetry. The words. The author believes that words can be weapons.
Okay.
That sounds pretty martial, doesn't it?
Well, who hasn't landed a verbal low blow in an argument? But the author means it in the context of stage performance. For example, they find it totally cliche to just say, I'm angry.
Yes, I'm angry. How uninspired. Even the water bottle falls asleep. But what's the alternative? Are we all supposed to quote Shakespeare now to express our emotions?
Shakespeare is always an option, of course.
Yeah.
But the author has a slightly different suggestion. They say you should depict emotions vividly, like a kind of verbal firework display.
So instead of I'm angry, it's more like a volcano rages in my soul and threatens to burn the whole world. Okay. Maybe a bit exaggerated, but
yeah,
what they're getting at.
Yes, the good old figurative language. Metaphors, similes, anything that stimulates the imagination and shakes the audience out of their lethargy.
But isn't that also a bit manipulative? I mean, using such drastic images to control the audience's emotions.
Manipulation is a strong word, of course.
Yeah.
But it's true that you can achieve a lot with language.
The author proves that themselves. The guy's a master of provocation. They aren't afraid to directly attack the reader and appeal to their conscience.
Yeah.
Stop lying to yourself. Don't be an idiot. You'll find plenty of sayings like that in their guide.
Yeah. The author doesn't mince words.
No, they don't.
But maybe that's part of their strategy. Shock therapy for the poetry soul.
Maybe. But I think it also seems a bit arrogant and condescending, as if they're the only one who knows the truth about poetry and stage presence.
Well, modesty has never been the strength of self-proclaimed gurus.
Sure.
But let's not get distracted by their attitude and focus on the content.
Exactly. What else does the poetry master have to offer us?
For example, the claim that you should emotionally manipulate the audience to achieve your goals. They used pretty stark comparisons like puppets and master of the game.
Bits. Master of the game. It almost sounds like they want to hypnotize the audience and impose their will on them.
I wouldn't put it quite so dramatically.
Okay.
But it's true that they attribute a pretty dominant role to the performer.
Well, dominant role, master of the game, basically it amounts to the same thing.
Okay.
The performer as an almighty dictator who makes the audience dance to their tune.
Okay, now you're exaggerating a bit.
Why?
But I understand what you're getting at.
Yeah.
The question is, of course, whether that's ethically justifiable.
Good question. Is it permissible for an artist to manipulate their audience so blatantly? Where does art begin and indoctrination end?
Tricky subject. There are no easy answers. But I think it always depends on the intention. Is the artist about expressing their own vision or about instrumentalizing the audience for their own purposes?
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I have to say, the author doesn't exactly make it easy to assume good intentions. With their aggressive rhetoric and sometimes questionable comparisons, they often overshoot the mark.
I agree with you there. Sometimes you wonder if they even take their own advice seriously.
Yes, that's a good question. Do they even believe in what they're writing? Or is it all just a show to sell their book?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe they are their own biggest victim, a prisoner of their own rhetoric.
A rhetorical cannibal, so to speak. That would be an interesting theory.
But now we're digressing. Shall we get back to the topic?
Gladly, where did we leave off?
Yes.
The question of whether you can manipulate the audience.
Exactly. And we came to the conclusion that it depends on the intention.
Right. But even if the intention is good, there are certainly limits that shouldn't be crossed.
Absolutely. You should always treat the audience with respect and not make them feel manipulated.
But where exactly is that limit? When does inspiration become manipulation?
That's the key question every artist has to ask themselves. There is no blanket answer. It always depends on the specific case.
Okay, that sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
But somehow also a bit unsatisfactory. Are there really no concrete clues to guide us?
Yes, of course there are. For example, you should always be transparent and make it clear to the audience what you want to achieve with your art.
That means you should disclose your intentions and give the audience the choice of whether to engage with it or not.
Exactly. Honesty is the best policy, even in art.
That sounds like a good conclusion for the first part of our deep dive.
Yes, I think so too. We've now provided some food for thought, and I'm curious to see what awaits us in the second part. So if we're being honest, the author is right about at least one thing. No one really wants to be bored on stage.
True, you can fall asleep at home. But does that mean we all have to become volcanoes to wow the crowds? I'm not sure the fire metaphor is the right choice for everyone.
Well, the author probably means it more figuratively. It's about working with strong images and emotions that trigger something in the audience.
So like wielding the verbal club instead of fencing with the foil.
Uh-huh.
But honestly, some poets are naturally more reserved. Should they all mutate into stage hogs just to please the author?
Well, no one has to pretend, but it certainly doesn't hurt to look at your own stage presence and find out what's authentic for you.
Authenticity, that's a good keyword. The author advocates more for control and the deliberate manipulation of the audience. Is that even compatible with authenticity?
That's the big question this guide raises. Can you be authentic and still be in control of the audience's emotions? Or does that inevitably end in some kind of calculated show where your own personality gets lost?
And what would be the point of it all then? If you portray yourself on stage just to get the audience's applause?
Yeah, that would be the height of irony. Buying the audience's approval through manipulation, but selling your own soul in the process.
A Faustian pact with the audience, so to speak. Sounds almost as gloomy as some of the poems you hear at poetry slams.
But let's stay optimistic and assume that there's another way. A way to be both authentic and captivating.
A path that doesn't end in self-abandonment, but on the contrary, strengthens and develops one's own personality.
Exactly, a path that focuses on your own voice and uses art to express yourself and connect with the world.
That sounds almost poetic. But isn't that a bit naive? In a world where everyone is clamoring for attention and putting themselves in the spotlight by any means necessary.
Naive, maybe, but not impossible. I believe there are still people who long for genuine, authentic experiences. And they're willing to pay for it, be it with their time, their attention, or even their money.
Okay, I'm happy to be convinced. But what should that look like in concrete terms? How do you manage to stand out in this sea of superficiality and self-promotion and touch people with real art?
I think it's mainly about being honest with yourself and finding your own voice. What do I want to say with my art? What is really important to me?
That sounds like a lot of self-reflection. But I admit, it makes sense. Before you try to manipulate others, you should first understand yourself.
Exactly. And once you've found your own voice, you can focus on how to make it sound its best.
So like perfecting the technique, improving the stage presence, developing your own style.
Yes, exactly. But always with the goal in mind of conveying your own message authentically.
Authentic and captivating at the same time. That sounds like quite a challenge.
It is, but I believe it's worth taking on that challenge. Because ultimately, art is about creating something that lasts.
Something that touches people and makes them think even after the final curtain has long since fallen.
Exactly, and I think that's only possible if you're honest with yourself and create your art out of a deep inner conviction.
Okay, I'm convinced. But what about the author and their poetry master guide? Should we condemn it completely now?
I would say we should see it for what it is. A provocative voice that makes us think, even if we don't agree with everything it says.
A rhetorical troublemaker who takes us out of our comfort zone and forces us to question our own positions.
Exactly, and that's worth something too.
True, because only those who constantly question their own positions can develop further.
And who knows, maybe some people will discover one or two useful suggestions in this guide.
Even if it's just placing your water bottles with extra care.
Exactly. You should leave no stone unturned.
In this sense. Cheers to poetry.
Cheers.
I don't know about you, but I'm really thirsty for some poetry now. But please, not the lukewarm poetry slop from school days. I want to feel the poetry that grips you and doesn't let go.
I agree with you. It's not just about stringing together beautiful words. Real poetry gets under your skin,
Oh.
It shakes you awake and makes you see the world with different eyes.
Exactly like the author of this guide. He really shook us up with his theses. But honestly, isn't this guy a bit contradictory? On the one hand, he preaches total control over the audience. On the other hand, he wants to encourage us to be more authentic and individual.
Well, maybe that's the trick. By first unsettling us with his provocative theses, he makes us more receptive to his message, like a kind of reverse psychology for the poetry scene.
Sounds plausible. But aside from the author's psychological games, I find it exciting to deal with the topic of stage presence, whether you want to rock poetry slams or just appear more confident in everyday life.
Absolutely. The ability to present yourself and your ideas convincingly is important in many areas of life. And you can definitely learn something from the techniques of poetry slams.
For example, how to paint pictures with language and evoke emotions, or how to work with your body language and voice to captivate the audience's attention.
Exactly. It's about developing a sense of your own presence and using it consciously. And of course, always staying authentic.
Authenticity, that's probably the most important keyword, because no matter how perfect the technique is, if it's not filled with genuine passion and conviction, it will never really touch you.
You're absolutely right. You might be able to dazzle people for a short time, but in the long run, they'll feel whether something comes from the heart or is just an artificial production.
So, dear listeners, if you want to take your poetry to the next level, forget the cheap tricks and concepts. Focus on what's really important to you, find your own voice, and let it resound with passion.
And don't forget, practice makes perfect. So grab your pens, get on stage, and show the world what you've got.
In this sense, be creative, Stephen. Until the next deep dive.